As we said, the spot Bitcoin ETF has been approved, giving you a little bit more detail on how this happened, some of the drama that unfolded, and what this means next. But here's a tweet breaking: the SEC officially approves all spot Bitcoin ETFs. Remember, there were a number of institutions, companies vying to apply for a spot Bitcoin ETF. They were all blanket approved. So we got Van Eck, we've got Bitwise, we've got Fidelity, we've got Franklin, we've got Valkyrie, we've got, of course, BlackRock and Grayscale and Wisdom Tree, all of these established institutions. I think the high level of why this matters, we've covered before on Bankless, as Anthony pointed out, there have been kind of months leading up to this outcome. Ever since June, we've been talking about the spot Bitcoin ETF. And the big win for crypto, I think, is this new pipeline to capital. So analysts have estimated between 10 and $100 billion in new buying pressure that this could unlock over the first 12 to 24 months. That, of course, is big. It also, maybe it means a bull market confirmation, at least in the sphere of normies, right? This is going to make absolutely massive news. It's much heralded, never happened before. And I think maybe one underlooked thing is they actually didn't want this. The regulators, let me say, and the SEC actually didn't want this to happen. In particular, Gary Gensler and Elizabeth Warren in her anti-crypto army. They didn't want this to happen. So that's the chair of the SEC very clearly was resisting this and dragged into this kicking and screaming. And yet he was put in a position where I think he felt like he had to approve, probably like as part of the court order, as part of the mounting pressure to like just do his job and stop standing in the way of this type of thing. And I think that is overall bullish on the story of crypto in the United States and across all other jurisdictions, even though the governors and the regulators may not want this technology, not want to support this asset class. They're kind of being pushed into it by their population. In this most recent case, by their elite bankers, by the Larry Finks of the world, by the BlackRocks of the world. That's how this hits me and the significance of it. Anthony, how does it hit you?
Yeah, same here. So exact same view here, especially on the fact that they were forced into this. And as I mentioned earlier, I believe it was because of the lawsuit that the SEC lost to Grayscale over converting GBTC, the trust, into a proper spot ETF. And what I find kind of funny about them being against these things is that they being the SEC, they have allowed other products to exist that are much worse for investors. I'm not saying the ETF is bad for investors, but they've allowed products to exist for a long time that are really bad for investors. And to keep on topic here, two of those products are GBTC and ETH, those Grayscale products. And the two reasons why those products are horrible is, one, they have a really high management fee for starters. I think it was as high as 2%. And two, they're a closed-ended fund. So you couldn't actually redeem your GBTC for actual BTC, which means that the thing never traded at fair value. It always traded around fair value. And then at one point, it got to a discount of about 50%. So if you had bought at around fair value, even at a premium, you were down 50%. And if you had sold that, you were just wrecked on it. So the SEC allowed this product to exist for a long time, mind you. It's not a new product. It's been around for a long time. Accrue, $20 billion worth of AUM, and then deny all the spot ETFs because they considered it too risky. The hypocrisy is insane to me around this. And it really just boils down to politics, I think, at the end of the day, especially from Gary Gensler, who obviously wants to get promoted within his kind of like a political sphere to probably Treasury, and Elizabeth Warren is basically his boss, so he's just following what she's telling him to do. But because of the fact that the SEC has, I mean, they didn't just lose against Grayscale; they've lost two other cases as well. They lost against Ripple, as we know. But because they lost so many times, they just became such an illegitimate institution in so many people's eyes. Then they had all the pressure from BlackRock et al. To get this thing approved. So that's what you've seen happen. Basically, they've been dragged kicking and screaming to approve these things. Their hands are tied, and they had to approve it.
Yeah, incredible point about these terrible products already existing, and the Bitcoin spot ETF only being an improvement for retail investors. There's some drama leading into this, Anthony. So on Tuesday, I believe it was around like 4 p.m. Eastern time, something like this, this tweet came out of the SEC official Twitter account. So this is at sec.gov. And this happened on Tuesday, saying, today, the SEC grants approval for Bitcoin ETFs for listing on all registered national securities exchanges, basically announcing that the Bitcoin spot ETF had been approved. Again, this was on Tuesday afternoon, East Coast time. They even include a quote from Gary Gensler himself. It turned out, at least the SEC said, that this tweet was a compromised tweet sent by a hacker, Anthony. And so what happened was the market price on Bitcoin just like absolutely torpedoed up and then fell back down. Some were calling this kind of like market manipulation. I believe within a half an hour or so, Gary Gensler tweeted something and said, basically, the SEC Twitter account has been compromised. There has been no Bitcoin spot approval. Again, this was on Tuesday, so before we had the official word. It seems like people were speculating all sorts of things, whether this was an intern who posted the tweet 24 hours earlier, or whether a hacker had indeed gotten into the SEC Twitter account and tweeted this out. It looks to me, in the weight of the evidence, like it was probably just a SIM swap type of attack. They didn't have 2FA on the account, and some sort of third party compromised the account and tweeted this out. But like, what chaos! I mean, like, I can't believe the incompetence of the SEC causing like billions of dollars of accidental market manipulation by not doing the basics of having their Twitter account secured. What's your take on all of these, like this craziness?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just perfect when you contextualize it. You contextualize the fact that the SEC keeps saying that they want to protect investors, right? That's their mandate as given to them by the US government. But they can't even protect their own Twitter account, which is like the bare minimum, I think, of protecting yourself, right? Protecting a Twitter account is not hard to do. Like all you have to do is set up proper 2FA. Like I know that there's been a lot of drama around doing mobile 2FA, but if you are the SEC, you should have at least one person in your organization that can say, hey, we need to secure our accounts, right? We need
You'd
to
think,
secure our
right?
Twitter account, others. So, but they didn't, apparently. Apparently, it was very easy to compromise the SEC account.
Yeah, this is some senators weighing in. Fraudulent announcements like the one that was made on the SEC social media can manipulate markets. We need transparency on what happened. That is Senator Cynthia Lummis. This is Philip Martin. Hey, Gary Gensler and the SEC. Serious offer. As a crypto exchange, we've had lots of experience. Philip Martin is, by the way, from Coinbase, with security protocols around social media. And as a veteran patriot, I love to help my country. If you want some help, feel free to reach out. So this is Coinbase offering their help to the SEC in an ultimate irony here. So kind of crazy, I think, that all of this happened like just 24 hours before it was officially approved. Certainly maybe a punch to the gut for the legitimacy of the SEC. But what's interesting to me, Anthony, is this actually barely passed. So for people who don't know, it has to be passed by the majority vote of a commission, right? So Gary Gensler, he is the chair of the commission, but there are five commissioners, five folks that vote, including Gary Gensler himself. And the Bitcoin spot ETF barely passed with a 3-2 vote. So the three who approved were Hester Peirce, a gentleman by the name of Mark Uyeda, I believe that's how it's pronounced, and then Gary Gensler. And then there were two against, including Caroline Crenshaw and another commissioner as well. Did you get a chance to read some of the statements coming out of both Gary and Caroline and Hester Peirce, Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, I saw the highlights of both Gary's and Hester's statements. I think in Gary's statement, he mentioned that the SEC is supposed to judge things based on merit, and then he goes on a bit of a tangent and says that like just because we approve these ETFs doesn't mean that we endorse them or think that they're good investments, which is a really stupid thing for a regulator to say if they're trying to be neutral, because that's not neutral. Like, is he going to say this about everything that they approve now, every ETF that they approve? It really does seem like, as I said, they were dragged kicking and screaming into this, and they needed to have their last kind of say on the fact that they think this is a really bad idea, which in my opinion, the SEC can go screw themselves on that, because it shouldn't be up to them to tell me what is a good or bad idea to invest in. Like I know what I'm doing. I think people are smart enough to figure it out for themselves, and it should be on the person to make their own decisions.
So Gary voted yes, we should say. But yes, this statement, I read it the same way you did, Anthony. It's kind of a whiny statement. He basically says, he says this, I have often said that the commission acts within the law and how the courts interpret the law. And then he goes on to say that basically their loss in the Grayscale case in September kind of forced their hand. And so now this is the court system interpreting the law for the SEC, and Gary just, acquiescing to their will here. But you're right. He says this at the end, just a parting stab. Though we're merit neutral, I'll note that the underlying assets in the metals ETPs have consumer and industrial uses, right? So like silver, gold, platinum, palladium, all of these have industrial uses. Well, in contrast, Bitcoin is primarily a speculative, volatile asset that's also used for illicit activity, including ransomware, money laundering, sanction evading, and terrorist financing. So he absolutely had to say that.
That just reads like an email Elizabeth Warren sent him and said, "Hey, you need to include this statement, this kind of part in your statement, because this is what I need to kind of push as my messaging out there." Which she's been doing, right? She's been like the leader of pushing this messaging of crypto being just used for terrorism financing, even if it's based on completely made up facts, right? That she's kind of pushed in Congress.
It's definitely anti-crypto army talking points. What was more concerning to me was Caroline Crenshaw's statement, who's another SEC commissioner. And in a worrisome fashion, like one of these commissioners might be in line for the throne of chair at some point in time. Gary Gensler's not going to be doing this forever. In fact, his days might be numbered. And so, right, there's like crypto's choice, which would be Hester Peirce as SEC chair. But then there's others who could be contenders, including some of these other commissioners, maybe like Caroline Crenshaw. And she says this, she dissents and she voted no. And she said, the commission also has not taken into account adequately broader public interest considerations. For example, it is well documented that many criminals use Bitcoin to evade U.S. financial sanctions. Ransomware attacks demand Bitcoin in payment. Analysis shows that these payments may end up funding our geopolitical rivals and adversaries. In approving these products for listing and trading on American exchanges, could we inadvertently be working at cross purposes with the goals of other arms of our government? Wow, I didn't realize all of that was in your mandate at the SEC. But apparently, according to Caroline Crenshaw, it is. She says, I am deeply concerned about today's action. She also goes on to take a jab at Bitcoin. She says, basically, I have a simple question. Wasn't Bitcoin supposed to solve this? If this technology is so revolutionary, why do they need an ETF in the first place? So definitely a lot of anti-crypto vitriol and a lot of opinions being baked into what's supposed to be a merit-based, credibly neutral regulator. Of course, the opposite end of the spectrum was just an absolutely banger piece from a statement from Commissioner Hester Peirce, who says, today marks the end of an unnecessary but consequential saga. What happened in the past is the goalposts kept moving as the commission slapped denied on application after application. And then the commission, rather than admitting error, offered a weak explanation most recently for its change of heart. She's basically saying, we're just doing what we should have done all along. And the commission, the SEC, has just put up roadblocks for the last 10 years. We squandered a decade of opportunities to do our job, she says. If we had applied the standard we use for other commodity-based ETPs, we could have approved these products years ago. But we refused to do so until a court called our bluff. Yes, well said. That's exactly what happened. And she concludes with this. I'm not celebrating Bitcoin or Bitcoin-related products. What one regulator thinks about Bitcoin is irrelevant. I'm celebrating the right of American investors to express their thoughts on Bitcoin by buying and selling spot Bitcoin ETPs. So you got the good regulators on one side who are kind of doing their job as a merit-based and incredibly neutral arbiter. And then you have others like Caroline Crenshaw who are just putting in roadblocks and, I don't know, forcing kind of their views of the asset class into their regulator position. I don't know how we get out of this state, Anthony, but I guess this is progress, kind of winning the Bitcoin spot ETF, even though the SEC was brought into this kicking and screaming.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like weaponization of regulatory bodies, right? This is exactly what's happening with the SEC, and maybe it'll happen with other regulatory bodies in the US. Obviously, I'm not across all of them, but I'm pretty across the SEC given that it's relevant to crypto. But it just feels like, yeah, as I said, like Elizabeth Warren is weaponizing the SEC. Maybe not just her, maybe there's others as well, but weaponizing it to achieve her own political goals, right? Because a regulator should not have an opinion on these things, in my opinion, right? I don't think that they should have an opinion on on the actual underlying assets. They should just look at it as a kind of merit neutral thing, as Gary Gensler said, not make these statements and put out these statements and just kind of approve it or deny it based on the merits, which I don't see any issue with there being a Bitcoin spot ETF. I don't see there being any issue with an ETH spot ETF. And honestly, a lot of the other assets out there in crypto, I wouldn't see an issue with that either, because I mean, a lot of people can already access these assets as well, mind you, right? Like they can already buy them on centralized exchanges and other kind of such places. But I think the main worry for people becomes that, oh, well, you know, these ETFs are in retirement accounts. What if people put their money into these things? Well, people can put their money into anything in their retirement accounts. Like there are a lot of traditional
GameStop meme
investments.
stocks, AMC,
Exactly.
like what? Right?
There's a lot of traditional investments that are bad investments. So it doesn't matter if it's crypto, if it's a stock. Like if it's a bad investment, it's a bad investment. It's simple as that, right? And you know, as we've seen in crypto, people are very quick to put their money into bad investments, regardless of how many warnings you put in place, or regardless of how many times you tell them this is a bad investment. I mean, I have people telling me all the time that these things that I believe are legitimate scams, they tell me, no, it's not a scam. I'm like, okay, well, you go do you. And no amount of like regulatory protection that these regulators think that they're going to be able to put in place would prevent people from doing this. People have to learn on their own. They have to make their own decisions. And I'm just sick of this kind of babying that these regulators, I mean, they say that they're doing this. I think in reality, they're just doing it as a political play.
It's
but,
not
you know,
their
they
job.
keep trying to.
And also, Anthony, they've been so freaking wrong. What have they protected like investors from over the last 10 years?
They didn't protect anyone from terror,
gains in crypto?
right?
Like what?
Yeah, exactly. They didn't protect anyone from FTX. They didn't protect anyone from Celsius and others. Like there was no protection going on here, and the fallout from those things have been massive. Whereas the fallout from Bitcoin's price going down has been, hey, wait a few years and you'll be in the green again.
It's just absolutely frustrating.
If you enjoyed all of that, then you'll absolutely love the Bankless newsletter. Join over 300,000 fellow readers, all for free. Click below to sign up.